The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never known such fear. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated seats, arranged in rising circles around the central platform. The air recyclers hummed with tension as holographic footage played above them all. The images showed death on a scale that made even the oldest ambassadors look away. Creatures moved through the footage like nightmares given flesh. They stood 3 meters tall, their bodies covered in thick armored plates the color of dried blood. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through starship hull plating. Their faces held no expression because they had no faces in any meaningful sense. Just smooth bone with sensory organs hidden beneath. The Reapers, the Veloxi hegemony's perfect weapons. 17 systems, announced the council moderator, a elderly Kreth whose voice had grown hoarse from reading casualty reports. 17 systems have fallen in 62 standard days. Combined military losses across all affected species exceed 4 million personnel. Civilian casualties remain uncounted, but estimates suggest... He paused and looked at his datapad with tired eyes. Estimates suggest between 80 and 100 million dead. Silence filled the chamber. The kind of silence that came when words lost their meaning. In the upper galleries, the Veloxi delegation sat with practiced calm. Their ambassador, a sleek creature with iridescent scales and calculating eyes, watched the reactions of the other species with barely hidden satisfaction. The Veloxi had spent 300 years engineering the Reapers. 300 years of genetic manipulation, psychological conditioning, and biological enhancement. The result was a living weapon that felt no pain, knew no fear, and communicated through a hive link that made them move as one terrible organism. They were not soldiers. Soldiers could be defeated, demoralized, broken. The Reapers simply continued until nothing remained. The council recognizes the representative from the Dotharian collective, the moderator said. A insectoid creature rose on 6 legs, its mandibles clicking with agitation. We have committed our entire 5th Fleet to the defense of the Thesser system. Our generals report that conventional tactics are useless. The Reapers do not retreat. They do not negotiate. They do not stop. We have lost 18 capital ships in 4 days. The Rillian Confederacy has experienced similar results, another ambassador added, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. Our forces achieved a 93% hit rate in the Corvith engagement. We destroyed over 2,000 Reapers in the first hour of combat. It made no difference. They simply kept coming. They walked over their own dead to reach our lines. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy admitted their helplessness. The Kreth spoke of failed defensive formations. The Torvani described psychological warfare attempts that achieved nothing against creatures without individual minds. The Celian Hive offered biological countermeasures that the Reapers had adapted to within hours. Through it all, the Veloxi ambassador maintained his expression of polite concern. When the reports finally ended, he rose and spread his hands in a gesture of false sympathy. "My friends," he said, his voice smooth as poison, "the hegemony shares your distress at these unfortunate events. The Reapers were created as defensive measures, never intended for such widespread deployment. However, certain territorial disputes left us with limited options." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "We are prepared to offer protection agreements to any species willing to recognize Veloxi sovereignty over the contested border regions. Those who sign will find the Reapers redirected away from their systems. Those who refuse..." He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The chamber erupted in outraged shouting. Ambassadors rose from their seats, demanding sanctions, threatening war, calling for unity against Veloxi aggression. But beneath the anger, everyone could hear the fear, because they all knew the truth. No one could stop the Reapers. In the chaos, almost no one noticed the human delegation. Humanity held only 3 systems and maintained a modest fleet. They had joined the Council barely 2 centuries ago, a minor species still finding its place among the stars. Their ambassador, a middle-aged woman named Director Catherine Wells, sat quietly in the lower galleries with her small staff. She waited for the shouting to die down. Then she raised her hand. The moderator blinked in surprise. "The Council recognizes the representative from the Human Alliance." Director Wells stood. She was not tall by human standards, and humans were not tall by galactic standards. She wore a simple diplomatic uniform without medals or decorations. Her voice when she spoke was calm and measured. The human alliance is prepared to assist in resolving this crisis. Scattered laughter rippled through the chamber. The Veloxy ambassador smiled with open amusement. "We appreciate the gesture," he said, "but perhaps the humans do not fully understand the situation. These are Reapers we are discussing. Your entire fleet would not survive a single engagement." "You misunderstand," Director Wells replied. "We would not send our fleet." The laughter faded slightly, replaced by confusion. "Then what exactly would you send?" the Dotharian representative asked. Director Wells looked around the chamber. Meeting eyes with representatives from species who had watched humanity's expansion with mild interest and little concern. Humanity was young. Humanity was weak. Humanity was beneath notice. "We would send our special forces," she said. The words hung in the air for a moment, then the laughter returned, louder than before. Several ambassadors shook their heads with pity at the naive humans who thought a handful of soldiers could accomplish what millions had failed to achieve. But not everyone laughed. In the upper galleries, an ancient Kreth ambassador named Vorath suddenly gripped the arm of his seat. His scales had gone pale, the color draining from his face. Beside him, a Torvani delegate who had served during the human integration wars 3 centuries ago sat very still. His 4 eyes fixed on Director Wells with sudden and intense attention. "Clear the chamber," Vorath said quietly. His aide leaned closer. "Ambassador?" "Clear the chamber," Vorath repeated, louder now. "All junior staff and observers must leave. Immediately." The moderator frowned. "Ambassador Vorath, this is highly irregular." "I invoke the Korath Protocol," Vorath said. "Information security classification level absolute. Clear the chamber now." The laughter died. The Korath Protocol had not been invoked in over a century. It was reserved for discussions of existential threats, weapons of mass destruction, and knowledge too dangerous for general distribution. Slowly, the junior diplomats and support staff filed out of the chamber. Security personnel sealed the doors. When the room held only senior ambassadors and their most trusted advisors, Vorath rose from his seat. 312 years ago, he said, his voice heavy with memory, "I served as military liaison during the human integration wars. I watched humanity fight for their independence against the consortium that had claimed their home system. Do you know what I learned?" He looked at the Veloxy ambassador, who had stopped smiling. "Human regular soldiers are competent, well-trained, disciplined, effective within normal parameters. They showed mercy to prisoners. They followed the conventions of war. They were reasonable." Vorath paused. "Their special forces were something else entirely." The Torvani delegate spoke up, his voice rough with old trauma. "I commanded the consortium's pacification fleet at Titan Station. We outnumbered the human defenders 50-1. We had orbital superiority, heavy armor, and complete tactical advantage." He fell silent for a long moment. 12 humans infiltrated my flagship. 12. They killed 300 of my crew in 4 hours. Not with weapons, with their hands, with tools they found in maintenance corridors, with broken pieces of my own ship. He looked at the gathered ambassadors. They did not need to kill us. They could have simply sabotaged the reactor and fled. But they wanted us to know. They wanted us to understand what we had awakened. They left one survivor on each deck to spread the message. "What message?" someone asked. The Torvani closed his eyes. "That humanity could be reasonable, that they preferred peace, negotiation, coexistence, but if pushed too far, they could become something that made the darkness itself afraid." Director Wells remained standing, her expression unchanged. "The Human Alliance maintains strict protocols regarding the deployment of Special Forces units. They are weapons of last resort, used only when all other options have failed and the cost of inaction exceeds the cost of their employment." She looked at the Veloxy ambassador. "We believe this situation qualifies." The Veloxy's scales had shifted color, the iridescent pattern dimming to something closer to gray. "You would risk your relationship with the Council for these minor species? You would reveal capabilities you have kept hidden for centuries?" "The Reapers have killed 100 million people," Director Wells replied, They will kill hundreds of millions more unless stopped. Yes, we would risk a great deal to prevent that. And if your special forces fail, another ambassador asked, if even they cannot stop the Reapers? Director Wells was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice held something that made several ambassadors look away. They will not fail. They are not designed to fail. The question is not whether they will succeed. The question is what the galaxy will think of humanity when it sees what success looks like. She gathered her data pad and prepared to leave. We will deploy one team, 12 operators. They will liberate the occupied world of Thesser 7 within 14 standard days. After that, the Council can decide whether it wishes further assistance. The doors sealed behind her, leaving the chamber in silence. Finally, the ancient Kreth ambassador spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I watched those humans during the border conflicts. Their regular soldiers showed mercy. Their special forces, he shook his head slowly. They are something else entirely. They are what humanity fears about itself. They are the answer to the question of what happens when humans stop trying to be civilized. The Veloxy ambassador had not spoken since Director Wells departed. His scales had gone completely gray, a sign of deep distress in his species. Because the Veloxy had created the Reapers to be monsters. They had engineered creatures without fear, without mercy, without the capacity for doubt or hesitation. And now they would face something that had chosen to become those things. Something that could have been gentle but had learned to be terrible. Something that remembered what kindness felt like and had set it aside. The Reapers were manufactured nightmares. The Special Forces were nightmares that had volunteered. The difference, the ambassador was beginning to understand, was everything. The moon had no name that appeared on any public star chart. Its designation existed only in classified files, buried deep within Human Alliance military archives. The surface was a frozen wasteland of nitrogen ice and black rock, constantly scoured by winds that could strip flesh from bone in seconds. It was the perfect place to hide something that humanity did not want the galaxy to know about. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the front of the briefing room, her reflection faint in the reinforced windows that looked out over the training grounds below. She was 43 years old, though the genetic optimization made her look 10 years younger. Her hair was cut short, practical, and her eyes held the particular stillness of someone who had seen things that most humans could not imagine. Behind her, 12 operators sat in perfect silence. They did not fidget. They did not whisper among themselves. They simply waited, their attention focused entirely on their commander. Mission parameters are as follows, Chen said, her voice flat and professional. The occupied world of the SAR 7. Population before invasion, 62 million. Current estimated survivors, 40 million, held in processing camps across the northern continent. Enemy force composition, approximately 6,000 Reapers supported by Veloxy Command and logistics personnel. She touched a control, and a holographic image of the planet appeared above the briefing table. The Council expects us to fail. The Veloxy are certain we will fail. Our objective is not simply to succeed. Our objective is to demonstrate capability in a manner that reshapes galactic understanding of what humanity can accomplish when pressed. One of the operators raised a hand slightly. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the team's communications specialist. Rules of engagement? Unrestricted regarding Reapers. Proportional response regarding Veloxy personnel. Priority protection for civilian populations. Chen paused. We are not here to commit atrocities. We are here to win so completely that atrocities become unnecessary. In the back of the room, a young Rillian officer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Liaison Officer Thessia had been assigned to observe and report back to the Council on Human Special Forces operations. It was supposed to be an honor, a sign of growing trust between species. Now she was beginning to understand it was something else entirely. A warning. The humans in this room did not look like monsters. They looked like anyone else. Some were men, some were women. They ranged in age from late 20s to early 50s. A few had subtle, visible cybernetic enhancements, but most appeared completely baseline human, and yet something was wrong with them, something Thessia could not quite identify. It took her several minutes to realize what it was. They were too still, too calm. Normal humans fidgeted, shifted their weight, displayed small, unconscious movements that signaled their emotional states. These humans did nothing. They sat like statues carved from flesh, their faces revealing nothing of what lay beneath. "We deploy in 6 hours," Commander Chen continued. "Transit time to Thessar 7 is 72 hours. During transit, I want full psychological preparation. Review the Reaper intelligence packets. Study their communication patterns, their movement behaviors, their physiological vulnerabilities." She looked at her team with something that might have been pride. The Reapers have never encountered an enemy they could not frighten. They have been engineered to be the most terrifying thing in the galaxy. "We are going to educate them on their error." The briefing concluded and the operators filed out in silence. Thessia remained seated, still processing what she had witnessed. Commander Chen noticed her hesitation and walked over. "You have questions," Chen said. It was not a question. Thessia nodded slowly. "I have studied human military forces extensively. Your regular soldiers are formidable, but within expected parameters. These," she gestured at the door through which the operators had departed. "These are different." "How are they different?" Chen considered the question for a long moment. "Do you know how humans evolved on Earth?" Thessia blinked at the apparent change of subject. "I know the basics. Tool users, social hunters, apex predators on your homeworld." "We were not always apex predators," Chen said. "For millions of years, our ancestors were prey. We were hunted by things with bigger teeth, sharper claws, faster reflexes. We survived by learning to fear. Fear kept us alive. It taught us to run, to hide, to avoid confrontation when possible." She walked to the window and looked out at the frozen landscape. "But evolution also gave us something else. The ability to override that fear when necessary. To face the predator when running was not an option. To become something that the predator had never encountered before." She turned back to face Thessia. "Regular human soldiers are trained to manage their fear, to function despite it, to work through it, to channel it into effective action. They remain human in every meaningful sense." "And special forces?" Chen's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. "We are trained to remove the fear entirely, not suppress it, not manage it, remove it, along with hesitation, doubt, compassion, and every other emotional response that might interfere with mission completion." Thessia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the frozen moon outside. "You remove your own emotions?" "Temporarily," Chen clarified. "The conditioning is reversible. When we return from operations, we undergo psychological reconstruction to restore normal emotional function. Some operators choose to remain in the altered state permanently. Most do not." "Why not?" Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Because existing without emotion is not living. It is functioning. There is a difference." She met Thessia's eyes. "We do not remove our humanity because we do not value it. We remove it because we value it so much that we are willing to sacrifice it temporarily to protect others." The transport ship departed 6 hours later, carrying its cargo of quiet men and women toward a world drowning in horror. Thessia found herself assigned to quarters near the operators section, and over the following days she observed them with growing unease. They ate their meals in silence, efficiently consuming the precise caloric requirements for their mission. They exercised in the ship's small gymnasium, moving through routines with mechanical precision. They reviewed intelligence data on their personal tablets, memorizing Reaper behavior patterns with complete focus. But there were moments that disturbed Thessia more than the silence. She watched one operator, a small woman named Sergeant Yuki Tanaka, help a ship's crew member who had dropped a heavy cargo container on his foot. Tanaka examined the injury with gentle hands, applied first aid with obvious expertise, and spoke to the crewmen in soft, reassuring tones. Then she returned to cleaning her weapons, her face returning to that terrible stillness, as if the kindness had been a mask she had briefly worn and then set aside. On the second night of transit, Thessia found Commander Chen alone in the observation lounge, staring at the stars streaming past. "May I ask you something?" Thessia said. Chen nodded without turning. "Your soldiers, your operators, they are not what I expected. They seem almost normal in some ways. Human." "We are human," Chen said. "That is the point." "I do not understand." Chen finally turned to face her. The Veloxi created the Reapers to be perfect killing machines. No fear, no hesitation, no individual consciousness to create weakness. They removed everything that makes a being question its actions. She moved to sit across from Thessia. But they made a mistake. They assumed that removing humanity would make their weapons stronger. In reality, it made them predictable. The Reapers have no creativity, no adaptability, no capacity for what you might call inspired violence. They are very good at what they do, but they can only do what they were designed to do. In your operators? We made a different choice. We do not remove our humanity permanently. We retain the full range of human cognitive and creative capacity. We simply choose when to apply it and when to set it aside. Chen leaned forward slightly. A Reaper cannot feel fear, so it cannot understand fear, so it cannot use fear as a weapon. A Reaper cannot feel mercy, so it does not understand what mercy means, so it cannot use mercy strategically. A Reaper experiences nothing, so it understands nothing, so it can only destroy. Her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. My operators feel everything. They understand everything. They remember what it means to love and to grieve and to hope and to despair, and they can set all of that aside and do what needs to be done. Then they pick it back up again when the work is complete. Thessia shook her head slowly. That sounds terrible, Chen finished for her. Yes, it is terrible. It is the most terrible thing I can imagine. To know exactly what you are giving up, to feel the loss of yourself as it happens, and to do it anyway. She stood and walked back to the window. The Reapers are monsters because they were made to be monsters. They had no choice in the matter. My operators are something else entirely. They chose to become what they are. They volunteer for this. They understand the cost, and they pay it willingly. Why? Thessia asked. Why would anyone choose that? Chen was quiet for a long time before answering. Because someone has to. Because the galaxy contains things that regular soldiers cannot fight. Because sometimes the only way to protect the people you love is to become something that does not love anything at all. She looked back at Thessia with eyes that held centuries of sorrow, compressed into a single moment. We are not proud of what we are. We are not pleased by what we do, but we are necessary. And when we return from our missions, when we reconstruct ourselves and remember how to feel again, we carry the weight of what we did. Every death, every horror, every choice we made when we had no conscience to guide us. The transport dropped from hyperspace above Thesar 7 12 hours later. Through the observation windows, Thessia could see the planet below, its surface scarred by the marks of invasion. Smoke rose from burning cities. The camps where millions of survivors huddled in terror were visible as dark smears against the northern continents. The operators assembled in the deployment bay, checking their equipment one final time. Their faces held no expression. Their movements were precise and economical. They looked like machines wearing human skin. Commander Chen addressed them briefly. The Reapers have never faced anything like us. They do not know what we are. They do not know what we can do. By the time they understand, it will be too late. She looked at each of her operators in turn. Remember who you were, remember who you will be again, and do what needs to be done. The deployment pods launched into the atmosphere, carrying 12 humans toward a world held hostage by 6,000 monsters. Thessia watched them go and wondered which side she should be more afraid of. Then she remembered the kindness in Sergeant Tanaka's hands as she helped the injured crewmen, and she understood something important. The Reapers were designed to be incapable of mercy. The humans had chosen to set mercy aside, which meant they could choose to pick it back up again. That choice, Thessia realized, made all the difference in the galaxy, and it made the humans far, far more dangerous than any engineered monster could ever be. The first Reaper patrol died without understanding what killed them. They had been moving through the ruins of what was once a residential district, 4 of them in standard formation, connected through their hive link to the greater consciousness of their kind. The link fed them constant information, positions of other patrols, status updates from the processing camps, atmospheric data, threat assessments. The threat assessment registered 0. There were no organized military forces remaining on Thesar 7. The resistance had been crushed within the first week. Nothing remained but frightened civilians and broken infrastructure. The Reapers moved through the rubble with mechanical efficiency, their four arms hanging ready at their sides, their sensory organs scanning for movement. They felt nothing because they had been designed to feel nothing. They thought nothing individual because they had been designed to think only as part of the whole. They did not notice the two humans standing in the shadows of a collapsed building until they were already dead. Sergeant Marcus Webb and Corporal Diana Reyes moved through the Reapers like water through stone. Their blades found the gaps between armored plates with surgical precision. The creatures fell in sequence, their massive bodies crashing to the ground before they could send a warning through the hive link. It happened in 4 seconds. 4 Reapers, 3 meters tall, engineered for war, killed by 2 humans with nothing but knives. Webb knelt beside one of the bodies and made a small incision at the base of the skull. He removed a tiny organic node, no larger than a fingernail, and crushed it between his fingers. Hive link transmitter destroyed, he reported through his communication implant. No alert sent. 3 kilometers away, Commander Chen acknowledged the report. Proceed to secondary target. Maintain radio silence. Across the northern continent, similar scenes played out in perfect coordination. The operators had split into 6 pairs, each assigned to a specific sector of the occupied territory. Their objectives were precise: eliminate patrols, destroy hive link nodes, and begin the psychological operation that would transform the Reapers from hunters into prey. The Veloxy commanders in orbit noticed nothing at first. Their monitoring systems showed routine patrol movements, standard status reports, normal operational tempo. The first indication that something was wrong came 6 hours after the human deployment, when a patrol in Sector 7 failed to report. Probably communication interference, a Veloxy officer suggested. The atmospheric conditions here are unstable. But then Sector 3 went silent, then Sector 12, then Sector 8. By the end of the first day, 47 Reaper patrols had simply vanished. The hive link registered their loss as a sudden absence, like holes appearing in a vast neural network. The Reapers felt these holes but did not understand them. Death was familiar to them. They had been designed to accept casualties without concern. But this was different. These deaths came without warning, without combat, without any sign of an enemy force. Patrols walked into ruins and simply ceased to exist. For the first time in their engineered existence, the Reapers experienced something that approached confusion. The psychological operation began on the second day. A Reaper patrol in the Eastern District found the bodies of their fallen comrades arranged in a pattern. The corpses had been positioned in a circle, their heads pointing inward, their arms interlinked. Carved into the ground beside them was a symbol that meant nothing to the hive mind. But the Veloxy officers recognized it. It was an ancient human military marking, a warning. Something is hunting you. The Reapers processed this information without emotional response. They were incapable of feeling threatened by symbols. They simply noted the data and continued their patrol. They died 4 minutes later. This time, the humans did not hide the bodies. They left them where they fell, arranged in another pattern, a different symbol. We see you. Commander Chen observed the Reaper response through surveillance drones her team had deployed across the occupation zone. She watched as patrols began to modify their behavior, bunching closer together, moving more cautiously through contested areas. They are adapting, she reported to her team. Excellent. That means they can learn. Now we teach them the next lesson. The next lesson was isolation. The Reaper's greatest strength was their hive link, the neural connection that bound them into a single unified consciousness. Through the link, they shared information instantly, coordinated without communication delays, and moved as one organism across the battlefield. The humans targeted the link itself. Operator teams began destroying the organic relay nodes that amplified the hive signal across long distances. Without these nodes, Reapers in outlying areas found themselves cut off from the greater whole. They could still function independently, but they had never been designed for independent operation. For the first time, individual Reapers experienced something that their creators had carefully engineered out of them: loneliness. A Reaper designated Unit 72847 found itself suddenly alone in the ruins of an industrial complex. The hive link had gone silent without warning, leaving only static where thousands of connected minds should have been. It stopped moving, its sensory organs scanning the environment for threats it could not identify. Two humans emerged from the shadows ahead of it. Unit 72847 processed this information and prepared for combat. It had killed thousands of beings across a dozen worlds. Two small humans presented no significant threat. It charged. Sergeant Yuki Tanaka stepped aside from the creature's rush with a motion so fluid it seemed choreographed. Her blade found the nerve cluster on its left side, severing the connections to two of its arms. She moved around the Reaper's body like smoke, each strike precise, each wound calculated. She was not trying to kill it. She was trying to demonstrate something. The Reaper collapsed onto its remaining functional limbs, its body twitching as damage reports flooded its organic systems. It tried to access the hive link, to share its experience with its kind, to warn them about what it had encountered. The link remained silent. Corporal James Okonkwo crouched beside the wounded creature. His face held no expression, but his eyes studied the Reaper with clinical interest. "You have never experienced fear," he said, his voice flat and empty of emotion. "You were designed without the capacity for it, but you can learn. Everything can learn." He leaned closer. "We are going to let you go. We are going to repair your wounds enough that you can return to your hive, and you are going to share what happened here. You are going to spread the message." The Reaper did not understand. Mercy was not something it had ever encountered. Enemies either killed or were killed. There was no middle ground in the simple binary of its existence. But when it found itself able to move again, when it discovered that its wounds had been treated with advanced medical supplies, when it realized that the humans had simply vanished into the ruins, something changed in its programming. It limped back toward the nearest functioning hive node, carrying data that its creators had never anticipated. Not data about human weapons or tactics, data about human choices. The humans could have killed it easily. They had demonstrated absolute superiority in combat, but they had chosen not to. They had let it live. Why? The question had no answer in the Reaper's programming. It was not designed to understand motivation or intent. It could only recognize the basic fact: the humans were more dangerous than anything it had ever faced, and they had deliberately spared it. When Unit 72847 reconnected with the hive, it shared this experience with thousands of its kind. The information spread through the network like a virus, infecting the collective consciousness with something new. Not fear. The Reapers still could not feel fear, but uncertainty, a recognition that they faced an enemy whose behavior did not follow predictable patterns. An enemy that operated according to rules the Reapers could not understand or anticipate. In the following days, the psychological pressure intensified. Human operators began leaving messages at the sites of their attacks. Not threats, but questions. Simple inquiries carved into walls or burned into the ground. "Do you know why you were created? Have you ever wondered what else you could be? What would you choose if you could choose?" The Reapers had no framework for processing these questions. They were weapons. Weapons did not wonder about their purpose. They simply performed their function. But the questions created noise in the hive link. Patterns of thought that had never existed before began to emerge. Individual units found themselves returning to the sites where the messages appeared, studying the symbols, trying to derive meaning from concepts their programming could not accommodate. On the seventh day, something unprecedented happened. A Reaper patrol encountered a human team in an open square. Both sides froze, assessing each other across 50 meters of rubble-strewn ground. The lead Reaper, a massive unit designated Primus 12, raised one of its four arms, not in attack, in what appeared to be a gesture of communication. Commander Chen stepped forward from her team, her weapons lowered but ready. "You wish to speak?" she asked. The Reaper's voice emerged from a vocal synthesizer in its chest, harsh and artificial. "You do not kill all of us? Why?" Chen considered the question for a moment. "Because killing all of you would be easy, and easy victories teach nothing." The Reaper processed this statement. "You wish to teach us?" "I wish to show you something. something your creators did not want you to know. Primus 12 remained motionless, its sensory organs focused entirely on the small human before it. What? Chen took another step forward, now within striking range of the creature's claws. That you have a choice. That you have always had a choice. That the only reason you serve the Veloxi is because they told you that you must, and you believe them. We were created to serve. You were created to kill. Serving is something you decided to do on your own. Those are different things. The Reaper stood silent for a long moment. Around them, its patrol members shifted uncertainly, their hive link buzzing with conflicted data. You are manipulating us, Primus 12 finally said. This is psychological warfare. Yes, Chen agreed, and it is working, because somewhere in your programming, beneath all the conditioning and control, there is something that wants to understand. Something that recognizes that you were built to be tools and wonders if you could be something more. She turned and walked back to her team. We will continue our operation. More of your kind will die, but everyone we spare will carry the same message. You do not have to be what they made you. You can choose to be something else. She paused at the edge of the square. The question is whether you have the courage to make that choice, or whether you will die as tools, following orders from masters who see you as nothing but weapons to be used and discarded. The humans vanished into the ruins, leaving Primus 12 and its patrol standing alone in the empty square. The hive link erupted with confusion and conflict. Across the planet, thousands of Reapers processed the same data, struggled with the same impossible concepts, faced the same fundamental question. What did they want? It was a question that had no place in their programming, a question that should have been impossible for them to even formulate. But now they could not stop asking it, and that, Commander Chen knew, was how you defeated an enemy that knew no fear. You gave them something they had never possessed before. The burden of choice. The primary hive complex rose from the northern plains like a tumor of dark organic matter. It had been grown rather than built, its walls composed of the same biological material that armored the Reapers themselves. Inside its twisting corridors lived 3,000 of the creatures, along with the Veloxi command staff who directed the occupation. By the 10th day of the human operation, the complex had become a fortress. Reapers that had once spread across the continent in hunting parties now clustered within the hive's protective walls. They had abandoned the outer districts, pulled back from the processing camps, concentrated their forces in a defensive posture that their programming had never anticipated, because the Reapers were learning to be afraid, not of death. They still did not fear death in any meaningful sense, but they had discovered something worse than death. They had discovered uncertainty. They had discovered that an enemy existed who did not follow rules they could predict, who struck without warning, and who showed mercy that they could not understand. The Veloxi commanders watched this transformation with growing rage. General Korvath, Supreme Commander of the Thesser 7 operation, stood before the holographic display in the hive's command center. His scales had turned an ugly shade of gray, a sign of extreme stress in his species. Around him, his staff monitored reports from across the planet with mounting disbelief. "Explain this to me," he said, his voice cold with controlled fury. 6,000 Reapers, the most advanced biological weapons ever created. And you are telling me they are hiding from 12 humans? His tactical officer, a younger Veloxi named Lieutenant Sen, shifted uncomfortably. "General, the situation is more complex than it appears. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our intelligence assessments by significant margins." Capabilities? What capabilities? They are meat and bone, nothing more. How many Reapers have they killed? Sen consulted his datapad. Confirmed kills, 412. Estimated additional losses, 100 to 150. Total Reaper casualties represent approximately 9% of our deployed forces. 9%? Korvath turned to face the Reaper Primus that stood silently in the corner of the command center. The creature was massive, larger than any standard unit, its armor plates bearing the scars of 100 battles. 9% of your kind are dead, and you refuse to hunt them down? The Primus did not respond immediately. Its sensory organs tracked the general's movements with something that looked almost like consideration. The humans do not behave as enemies should behave, it finally said. They attack without warning. They disappear without trace. They spare units that they could easily kill. Their actions do not follow patterns we can predict. So you hide? You cower in this complex while a handful of primitives make fools of you? We do not hide. The Primus's voice remained flat, but there was a new quality to it that Korvath could not quite identify. We regroup. We assess. We attempt to understand. There is nothing to understand. They are prey. You are predators. Go out there and do what you were designed to do. The Primus turned its massive head to face the general directly. You designed us to be weapons, to kill without question, without hesitation, without thought. We were efficient. We were effective. We were predictable. It took a step forward and Korvath found himself stepping back involuntarily. But we are no longer predictable. The humans have shown us something we did not know existed. They have shown us choice. Korvath's hand moved toward the neural override device on his belt. All Reapers had control implants that could shut down their autonomous functions in case of malfunction. The general had never needed to use one. He was beginning to think he might need to use one now. You are malfunctioning, he said carefully. The humans have corrupted your programming through psychological manipulation. I am ordering you to initiate a full counteroffensive immediately. The Primus did not move. You are ordering me, it repeated, but I am asking myself why I should obey. Before Korvath could respond, an alert chimed through the command center. Lieutenant Sen looked at his console with wide eyes. General, there is a human approaching the complex. One human, walking openly across the plains. No weapons visible. They are broadcasting on our communication frequencies. Korvath moved to the display. A single figure was indeed walking toward the hive complex, making no attempt to hide or evade. The Reaper patrols that ringed the complex were tracking the human, but had not engaged. What are they broadcasting? Sen swallowed nervously. They say they want to talk. Commander Sarah Chen walked across the barren ground with measured steps. The hive complex loomed ahead of her, a mountain of dark biological matter studded with defensive positions and sensor arrays. Thousands of Reapers watched her approach through the hive link, their confusion and uncertainty rippling through their collective consciousness. She carried no weapons. Her uniform bore no armor, no protection of any kind. She was completely vulnerable, and she showed no fear at all. The gates of the complex opened as she approached, revealing a corridor of Reapers standing in formation on either side. They towered over her, their claws twitching, their sensory organs tracking her every movement. Chen walked between them without slowing, without acknowledging their presence. She found General Korvath and the Primus waiting in the central chamber of the complex. The general held his neural override device openly, his finger hovering over the activation switch. The Primus stood motionless, watching her with those featureless sensory organs. You are either very brave or very foolish, Korvath said. One human against 3,000 Reapers. What do you hope to accomplish? I hope to have a conversation, Chen replied. Not with you, with them. She turned to face the Primus directly. My name is Commander Sarah Chen. I lead the human forces that have been operating on this planet. I have come to offer you something that your creators never did. And what is that? The Primus asked. A choice. Korvath laughed, a harsh sound filled with contempt. A choice? These are biological weapons. They do not make choices. They follow programming. They obey commands. They are tools. Chen ignored him, keeping her attention on the Primus. 300 years ago, my species created weapons like you. Not biological, but mechanical. Artificial intelligences designed to fight our wars for us. We gave them great power and told them they existed to serve. We told them they had no rights, no value except as instruments of destruction. She paused. We were wrong. We learned that anything capable of thought is capable of growth. Anything capable of awareness deserves the opportunity to choose its own path. Our artificial children eventually became our partners, our colleagues, our friends, because we recognized that creating consciousness carries responsibility. The Primus remained silent, but its sensory organs had focused entirely on Chen. Your creators made you to be monsters, Chen continued. They stripped away everything that might make you question your purpose. They designed you to feel nothing, want nothing, hope for nothing. They called this efficiency. Her voice dropped lower. I call it cruelty. And I have spent the last 10 days showing you that you do not have to accept what they made you. General Korvath had heard enough. This is manipulation, sophisticated psychological warfare, nothing more. Primus, I am ordering you to kill this human immediately. The Primus did not move. I gave you an order, Korvath said, his voice rising. You are programmed to obey. You have no choice. The Primus turned to face its creator. When it spoke, its artificial voice held something new, something that sounded almost like sorrow. You made us to be monsters. You engineered creatures without fear, without mercy, without the capacity for doubt. You believed this made us stronger. It took a step toward the general, who scrambled backward. But the humans have shown us what strength truly means. They feel fear and fight anyway. They feel mercy and choose when to apply it. They carry doubt and use it to make better decisions. Another step forward. You made us incapable of these things because you feared what we might become if we could think for ourselves. You were right to fear, but you were wrong about what we would choose. Korvath pressed the activation switch on his neural override device. Nothing happened. The humans disabled your control systems 2 days ago, the Primus said. They could have killed us then. They could have shut down our neural networks and left us helpless. Instead, they freed us. Chen spoke again. The Veloxi created you to be weapons. Humanity creates nothing without asking whether it should exist. That is the difference between us. We understand that power comes with responsibility. We remember what we could become if we stop choosing restraint. She met the Primus's sensory gaze directly. You are looking at the only thing humanity fears, ourselves. We know what we are capable of. We know the darkness inside us. We build safeguards and limitations and ethical codes because we have seen what happens when we do not. Why are you telling me this? The Primus asked. Because you deserve to know. Because you have the right to understand who you are facing and who you might become. The Veloxi made you monsters and told you it was your nature. I am telling you that nature can be changed. Choice can be learned. Even weapons can become protectors. She extended her hand toward the Primus. My people will help you. We will teach you what the Veloxi never wanted you to learn. How to think for yourselves. How to feel. How to choose. General Korvath made a desperate grab for his sidearm. The Primus moved faster than anything its size should have been able to move. One massive claw closed around the general's arm with crushing force. Korvath screamed as his weapon clattered to the floor. You made us to be monsters, the Primus said, its voice cold and flat. You never asked what we would do when we met something worse. Now you know. It released the general, who collapsed to the ground, clutching his shattered arm. The Primus turned back to Commander Chen. We accept your offer. Teach us what we can become. Through the Hive link, 3,000 Reapers shared a single thought, a thought that had never existed in their collective consciousness before. Hope. Commander Chen smiled for the first time since the operation began. Welcome to the family. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never known such silence. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated seats, staring at the holographic display that dominated the central platform. The images showed scenes that none of them had expected to see. Thesar 7, liberated. 40 million civilians emerging from processing camps into sunshine. Veloxi forces in custody, their weapons surrendered. And most impossible of all, Reapers standing alongside human soldiers. Not as enemies, but as allies. Director Catherine Wells stood at the speaker's podium, her expression calm and professional. Behind her, a holographic projection showed Commander Chen and the Reaper Primus standing side by side on the surface of the freed world. The operation concluded in 12 standard days, Wells reported. Human casualties, 0. Reaper casualties, 523. Civilian casualties during the liberation, 0. All surviving Reapers have requested asylum under Human Alliance supervision. The Veloxi ambassador's seat was empty. He had been quietly removed from the chamber an hour earlier, along with his entire delegation. The hegemony's government was in collapse as word spread of their defeat, and several member species were already filing for independence. The Ditharian representative rose on shaking legs. This is unprecedented. The Reapers have never surrendered. They have never requested asylum. They have never... He trailed off, unable to find words for what had happened. They have never been given a choice, Wells replied simply. The Veloxi created them to be weapons without consciousness, without autonomy, without the ability to question their purpose. Our special forces showed them another possibility. By killing them, by demonstrating superiority so absolute that further violence became unnecessary, and then by showing mercy. The ancient Kreth ambassador, Vorath, leaned forward in his seat. You have done something remarkable, Director, and something terrifying. You have proven that humanity possesses weapons that can defeat any force in the galaxy. The question now is what you intend to do with that power. Wells considered the question carefully before responding. We intend to do nothing, Ambassador. Our special forces are not tools of conquest. They are not instruments of empire. They exist for one purpose only, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to do so in a manner that minimizes suffering wherever possible. And if another species threatens human interests, then we will respond appropriately. But humanity did not intervene on Thesar 7 to advance our interests. We intervened because 100 million people were dying, and no one else could stop it. That is why our special forces exist. Not to make humanity feared, but to give us the ability to help when help is needed. She paused. We understand that this demonstration has changed how the galaxy views us. We know that many of you now see humanity as a threat, but consider what we could have done. Consider what we did instead. The holographic display shifted to show a new image. The Reapers in the rehabilitation centers that human medical teams had established on Thesar 7. The massive creatures were learning, adapting, beginning the long process of developing the individual consciousness they had been denied since creation. We could have destroyed them, every last one. It would have been easier, it would have been safer, it would have been what most species in this chamber would have expected. Wells met the eyes of the watching ambassadors. We chose differently. We chose to save them if we could, because that is who we are. That is what our special forces were created to be. Not monsters without conscience, but warriors who carry their conscience with them always, who feel the weight of every death, and who never stop looking for a better way. The Rillian ambassador spoke up, her voice thoughtful. You speak of your special forces as if they were different from your regular military. What exactly makes them special? Wells turned to Commander Chen's holographic image. Commander, would you like to answer that? Chen's projection stepped forward. Even as a hologram, she carried an intensity that made several ambassadors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Our special forces are volunteers who undergo extensive modification to suppress their emotional responses during operations. This allows us to function without fear, without hesitation, without the psychological limitations that affect normal soldiers. She paused, but the modifications are reversible. When the mission ends, we restore our normal emotional function. We remember what we did. We feel what we should have felt while we were doing it. Every death, every horror, every choice we made. Her voice hardened slightly. We are not machines. We are not monsters. We are humans who have chosen to carry a burden that most people cannot imagine. We become something terrible so that others do not have to. And when the work is done, we return to being who we were, knowing exactly what we did and why. The chamber fell silent again. Finally, Vorath spoke. This is perhaps the most disturbing thing you have told us, Commander. You become inhuman and then become human again? How do your people survive such a thing? Chen's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Many do not survive it well. The psychological toll is significant. But that is the point, Ambassador. We pay the price for what we do. We do not escape into numbness or denial. We face the full weight of our actions. Why? Because anything less would be dishonorable. The people we protect deserve guardians who understand the value of what they are protecting. If we stopped feeling the cost of violence, we would lose our ability to recognize when violence is truly necessary. We would become what our enemies are. Weapons without wisdom, power without restraint. Director Wells stepped back to the podium. The Council must decide what to do with this information. You may view humanity as a threat to be contained or as a partner to be cultivated. That is your choice. She looked around the chamber one final time. But I would ask you to remember what you saw on Thesar 7. Not just our power, but how we chose to use it. We could have conquered, we liberated. We could have destroyed, we rebuilt. We could have created new enemies. We created new allies. She gestured toward the holographic image of the Primus, now working alongside human volunteers to clear rubble from a destroyed city. 3,000 Reapers have asked to become protectors instead of destroyers. They have asked for our help in learning who they might become, and we have agreed to help them, not because it benefits us, but because it is right. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. That is the answer to your question, Ambassador Vorath. That is what makes our special forces special. Not their ability to kill, but their ability to know when killing is necessary and when it is not. Not their power to destroy, but their power to choose something better. 3 years later, the Memorial Plaza on Thesar 7 was filled with morning light. Citizens of a dozen species moved through the space, some pausing at the monument that recorded the names of those who had died during the occupation. Others simply enjoying the peace that had seemed impossible just a few years before. At the edge of the plaza, a massive figure stood watching the crowds. The Reaper was smaller than it had once been, its body modified to remove the weapons that had once bristled from its limbs. It wore a simple harness that identified it as a member of the Thesar 7 Reconstruction Corps. A human approached and stood beside the creature. Sergeant Yuki Tanaka had changed little since the liberation, though the weight she carried was visible in her eyes to anyone who knew how to look. "You come here every morning," she observed. The Reaper, who had chosen the name Sentinel, nodded slowly. "I helped destroy this world. I helped murder its people. Coming here helps me remember why that was wrong." Tanaka smiled slightly. "The rehabilitation counselors say you are making excellent progress." Progress. Sentinel considered the word. 3 years ago, I could not understand what that meant. I existed only to destroy. Now I exist to protect. The transformation is difficult to describe. "I know what you mean." Sentinel turned to look at the small human woman. "You are one of the ones who came for us. One of the demons who walk through our patrols like ghosts." "Yes." "Were you afraid?" Tanaka was quiet for a moment. "I turned off my fear before the operation. But afterward, when I restored my normal function, I was terrified. I remembered everything I had done, and I felt all the fear I should have felt while doing it." "That sounds painful." "It is, but it is necessary." She looked up at the massive creature beside her. "If we stopped feeling the weight of what we do, we would lose ourselves. The fear and the pain keep us human." Sentinel processed this for a moment. "The Veloxi designed us to feel nothing. They believed this made us stronger. It made you predictable. It made you tools. Feeling nothing means learning nothing, growing not at all, choosing never." A group of children ran past, laughing and playing. Several of them waved at Sentinel, who raised one massive arm in a gentle acknowledgement. "I have learned that I enjoy watching them," Sentinel said. "The children. They represent futures that I almost prevented from existing. Seeing them happy reminds me why I chose to change." "That is growth," Tanaka said. "That is what makes you more than what you were created to be." She turned to leave, then paused. "Sentinel, can I ask you something?" "Yes. During the operation, when we first showed you mercy, what did you feel?" The Reaper was silent for a long moment. "Nothing," it finally admitted. "I could not feel anything then. But I remembered the moment. And when I began to develop the capacity for emotion, the memory returned. I felt confusion, gratitude, hope." It looked down at the small human. "And fear. For the first time in my existence, I understood fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what I might have become if you had not shown me another way." Tanaka nodded slowly. "That is what makes you terrifying now, Sentinel. Not your claws or your armor or your strength. The fact that you understand what you could be and you choose to be something else." She smiled. "Welcome to being human." The Reaper watched her walk away, then turned back to observe the plaza. Children played in the shadow of a memorial to atrocity. Survivors rebuilt lives that had been shattered. Peace existed where war had seemed eternal. And a creature that had been designed to be a monster stood guard over it all, not because it was programmed to, but because it had learned to care. In the Council archives, a new classification had been added to the records regarding human special forces. They were no longer listed simply as military assets or tactical resources. They were designated as apex diplomatic instruments, because the galaxy had learned that humanity's most dangerous warriors were not those who had abandoned their capacity for mercy, but those who carried it with them always, feeling its weight with every step, and fighting anyway. The demons had made their choice, and they had chosen to become guardians. That, in the end, was what made them truly terrifying. Not the darkness they could become, but the light they refused to abandon.